Hey everyone, it's Ross from Mythic Mountains Folk Tabletop Club. So if you follow this channel, you've probably heard that a few times now. Folk Tabletop Club. I think it's long past due for us to talk about what that is. So this is going to be my first video where I just talk to the camera and we talk about a subject. I'm going to try it out. I haven't scripted this. I did finish a blog on Substack about this, which is entitled, What is Folk Tabletop? And I'll include that in the description along with some other resources and what inspired it. So right off the bat, let me just go ahead and define it. When I say folk tabletop, what I mean is the authority of the game arises from the table, not other sources. What does that mean? Well, what it looks like for us usually is, until recently, the tabletop world, the geek culture of tabletop was mostly divided into two spheres, brand and what I would call folk. And overwhelmingly, that's brand culture, brand tabletop. So if you go into a game store, what role-playing game are you going to find? Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, or now Dungeons & Dragons 2024. And I think you might probably find both. You maybe will find Pathfinder. Maybe you'll find Call of Cthulhu, or maybe they'll place a product for a different game. I had a game store nearby that offered Root, the RPG, and they had Zweihander ones. But these were sort of like, look at this interesting, exotic, spicy little thing from afar that we've sort of brought in here. And it was rare even that any game store nearby for me would do that out of most of the game stores nearby. Shout out to Rusty Scabbard in Lexington. You guys are a real tabletop store. And there's a couple of others, Matchstick Games and stuff. But, you know, for the most part, I'm in Central Kentucky. You go to a game store, you're going to find Dungeons and Dragons. And if you want a war game, what are you probably going to play? Probably Warhammer 40,000. Maybe Warhammer Fantasy. Maybe Battletech. Maybe. But these games are the hegemony. They're the central island upon which all other islands are on the outskirts. And much smaller than that, in the slice of the pie, is what I call folk tabletop. The far extreme of that, which you have seen on our channel that we indulge in, are, you know, do it yourself and my friend's indie game that he's making, and kit bashing and homebrew and classic games and super vintage games and experimentation and gleefully collaborating and sharing resources openly as if we all own this thing equally and no one else owns it. And that's sort of the folk mindset. And I'm going to kind of peel back a few layers of this. I'm going to just go down my blog and just call out some ideas and mention some things. Right off the top, I have to say, this is primarily inspired by two things. Number one, my experiences in directing an international play club online for several years, where we have ran at this point thousands of games, thousands upon thousands of hours of games, hundreds of different players from all over the world. That experience since 2020 has informed my idea of how a lot of this works practically. And then the other thing is, I have to say that the very specific idea of folk tabletop games, I took from, although the idea had been in my mind for a while, but what really crystallized it for me was the Questing Beast video. D&D doesn't need Wizards of the Coast anymore, which I will also link at the bottom. He'll maybe do a better job than me explaining this concept, so you should check out that video. But anyways, folk tabletop. This to me is all about where authority lies. And by the way, I'm just This is just about tabletop, okay? And it's about my practical experience with playing lots of tabletop games on the internet for several years now, okay? But anyways, folk tabletop, it's about authority. It's about the authority resting with the table. Let me crack some of that open and then also explore some things that aren't exactly on the blog. First of all, is that even in question? Like, I think most people that watch this, most people that read the blog are going to say, of course, it's my game. I decide, if you're the dungeon master, sort of in a trad game or traditionally, the dungeon master gets to decide a lot too, right? They're the authority, or maybe you invite people over your house, and that sort of forms the basis, the starting point of authority is, hey, you're coming over to my house and you're new to the game. Welcome, but this is the game we're playing, and that's kind of the starting point, and that's common for a lot of people. But I want to say on a macro level, if you're like me and you like to experiment and you like to explore the roots of the hobby and you want to try new games, you want to try new ideas, and you do a lot of gaming and you're really passionate about it, you may have encountered some of the things I have, some of the resistance that the people in Mythic Mountains Folk Tabletop Club have. I'm not the only one. A lot of us in the club have experienced this. So I'm going to introduce some concepts here. Then I'm going to throw out some principles. I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'm going to close the video for now. And maybe if people are interested, I can explore some of this further. But let me throw out some ideas. Let me start with this one, the signal. I refer to this sometimes, but I want to be honest and say this comes from personal experience, and then it comes from the experience I've had of people coming into the hobby and me seeing myself in them. And the signal was the Ross that ran 5e for like 6 years. And I didn't know what White Box was. And I didn't know what Dolmenwood was. I didn't know what Dungeon World was. And I had the internet. And I looked on the internet. How do I do this? What is this? What's out there? And overwhelmingly, it gave me one pathway. In the information age, it offered me one thing. And you can run this experiment. And I'm confident most people, this will be the case. That if you type in, let's say Google, you type in Dungeons and Dragons, what are you going to get? Are you going to find out about Frank Mincer's masterpiece box set of Beckme? That's probably the best version for people to start with. Are you going to find out about all of the amazing alternatives and different versions you could try? Like me, if you don't know anything, and I was getting out of the army at the time, and I just looked it up. I grabbed it off the shelf. If you go to a general retailer or Walmart, what will you find? I'm willing to bet you will only find one game. Now, I'm not saying we need to crowd the shelves of Walmart with a niche hobby of 50 different games that most people are just not going to be interested in. That's not my point. But my point is, I can say from personal experience, it is possible to be in this hobby for years and to never know that the game that is for you is out there. It's possible. And some of that is for insidious reasons, in my opinion. The fact that if you type Dungeons and Dragons into YouTube search bar, even me now, and I have got a wacky YouTube algorithm at this point. I love indie stuff. I should be getting all the indie stuff. It's not. And it's going to bring up a banner of product stuff, and it's all going to be by one company or one game. And this is a known thing among D&D YouTube people that I call this the signal. Okay, so that's one thing. There's the discourse. And I don't think this is too controversial, that basically the way concepts are presented online and on social media and stuff is not the best version of concepts. The popularized version of something that someone cares about, you'll find isn't very nuanced if you look at it on a social media platform like Twitter or Reddit. And can that affect your game? I think this you could be more immune to. This you could say, I don't need people on Reddit to tell me about our table. What comes from our table is the authority. And what actually happens in a game, in actual play, that is the magic. I don't need Reddit to tell me about that. That is a healthy attitude and a healthy relationship with that. It is a healthy relationship to not worry about what a company thinks, that is just not interested in your table. They need to make money. But they have a little more power because for most of us, you will have to invite new players and they will come through a filter. I'm more concerned with what I call the signal, which is that generally speaking, I find that new players, if they have any concept of Dungeons and Dragons at all, if they've started at all, they already are told by the signal to be reticent about alternative forms of play and old or vintage or new ideas or experimental ideas about role-playing games. The discourse, I think it's a little easier, maybe because we know that's something some people will say, like, for example, the Matt Mercer effect, that you have players, and I've had that before, where they get used to live plays that are very well produced and everything, and then they come to a game and they realize it's very different. Maybe we're just more aware of that, but I think people are becoming more aware of the signal as well. So those are two things. And then I want to define a few other key concepts here. The first one is I want to define what I mean when I say authority, which is to say, usually people say, well, I'm the dungeon master, so that I'm sort of the host of the table and I'm the authority. Fair enough. That's common. Or in some games, they might be GM-less. It's more clear that the table is the authority. So when I say the table is the authority, I mean whatever arrangement that individuals consent to. And whatever that is, that what I call the group conscience, that forms what is the true authority and what creates actual play. And that's what actually matters. And then you have, so that's also the table. And then I also want to describe what I consider consent and why that matters. Unfortunately, as soon as I even bring up the word consent, people are going to tie that to the discourse. And the discourse form of consent is really unfortunate. It is a malformed presentation of an important concept. Because I would say that the only way that this amazing thing we do can happen is to have the table, this group conscience. And the only way that you can have a group conscience is to have a consenting individual that is responsible for themselves and fully able to communicate that consent and to say, I want to be a part of that. And to have equal partnerships where the table says, we want you to be a part of that. And the consenting person also says, yeah, I want to be a partner of that, a part of that. And then they come together. And then that group consciousness, what I'll call the magic circle, forms. And the game can actually arise. I won't go into all the online versions of how consent is presented. A lot of them are wacky. And I just won't go any further than that in the video. I present kind of some problems with it in the blog post. But generally what I mean is what you see online is not the best presentation, in my opinion, of what is such an important concept. Okay, so those are some concepts and definitions. Here to me are the principles of folk tabletop gaming. From me, who is not in charge. I should say, this is my experience with it. This is what I think works well. This is what I think has made this play club where we've played all these games. We've had so much joy, and it's all these games, they've worked out so well, and we've had so much fun, and they've brought people together, and they've brought down divisions, and they've shattered divides, and we've met people from all over the planet who are very different. And all of that has melted away, and we've made things together. And that's happened because of these games. Anyways, here's how I think it works. Number one, and this is based on the central idea of this, and I'll include, check out the blog for the resources. But Johan Huizinga, games must be based on this voluntary participation. They must be consent. If something is not entirely open and consensual, that doesn't make it kind of what they talk about in the RPG discourse. What it could be is a survival task. Like you can gamify something. You can do a simulation and be a soldier in war. And that's not consensual. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it, or, you know, that it's just inherently bad or something overly simple like that. But according to this theorist, in order for it to be a game, you must be able to set aside what is real and enter the magic circle. You must enter an other place. And so the only way that you can do that is to have this open spirit of play. And the only way you can do that is to have voluntary participation. It cannot be compelled. And so games are based on consent. It's the number one principle. That the reason that matters is not because of the discourse concept of consent, but because it establishes how the authority of the table is formed. Because the second principle is the table is the authority. The goals of the table, the truth of the game, like whatever it says it really is, the authority of play, the rule book, everything from the rule books, the content of it, everything arises from the table when actual play occurs. I think that's maybe the central concept of this, is that it's all about that central act. Anything that threatens that act or takes away from it or imposes on it is anti-folk. And then the third principle that kind of arises from that I think is important, especially in matters of discourse, dealing with companies and bringing people on, is you'd say, what is the right way to play? That's sort of how the discourse frames it a lot. And the general answer in the discourse, which I find to be sophism, is there is no right way to play. Well, and to that I say the third principle is it depends. It depends. There could be a right way to play, actually, but it depends on the table and the actual game coming out of the table and its goals. And then there could be a right way to play. And this is why the discourse doesn't work. The last concept I want to present at the end, not to end on something like an antagonist to this concept, because I don't think it has to be, and I hope I can explain that, and I hope this can be nuanced. But somewhat opposite of folk gaming, this concept I'm describing is what I would call brand gaming. And brand gaming is when you're caught up in the zeitgeist of a thing. And I'm not trying to just portray this as a bad thing. And I guess up front, let me say that I think a folk gamer like me can freely borrow from any brand game or any amount of brand gaming. And that doesn't make it not folk gaming, because it's about where authority comes from. So I absolutely think you can be a 5e folk gamer. I absolutely think so. Anyways, though, it calls to mind, especially World of Warcraft. You know, a friend of mine, he's introduced me to World of Warcraft, and I've had a lot of fun with him. And he's super into it and invested so many years into it. And it depends entirely on Blizzard Entertainment. Entirely on Blizzard Entertainment. And if you try to do something on your own, it's very insecure. They could take it away. They could threaten you, and they own it. World of Warcraft is Blizzard Entertainment's. And when you experience World of Warcraft, you are waiting for Blizzard to do the next thing. Your hobby in World of Warcraft is oftentimes complaining about Blizzard Entertainment. and you're kind of waiting. All right, what are they going to do in the next patch? And what's this next expansion? Oh man, I don't know. I don't like what they did with that storyline. Wow, they really ruined that character. Or I could really see where they're going with this. I can't wait to find out about this. And it's always something outside of the participant. And that's the hierarchy. That's the power relationship. If I were to kind of walk that further a little bit closer to tabletop, no, totally in the realm of tabletop, is Warhammer. And I think that is a realm where the brand game is victorious. They have won. They have an utter hegemony, as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm just now getting into war games, but my observation is that for a lot of people, war games are now synonymous with Warhammer. And if you go to just any Joe Schmo gaming store and you say, I want to get into war games, or if you type it in the internet, that's what you're going to find. And what's interesting is you could just do your own thing, right? I mean, with a war game, who's to tell you and your friends what you have to do? And, you know, what you do in the sanctity of the table, they shouldn't be able to control. But Games Workshop is quite successful at this. And you can see that in that participants often complain about, oh gosh, Games Workshop this, Games Workshop that. And they hate on them. And at the same time, wow, they make really good models though. The figure, you know, whatever. And everybody is waiting to see what Games Workshop does. And that's the power, that's the relationship with authority there. And now let's walk that back to Dungeons and Dragons. And as of about 2 years ago, this has really changed. And I think this might be the first time it's really, really changed since 1979, when the brand game was formed by one Gary Gygax. And if you know me and you know my games, you know that he's a hero for me, and I adore Gary Gygax. He's not perfect, and it's not even the point. But, you know, as a game designer, I seriously consider him a genius. And I think his writings, I mean, and we have him to thank for Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe this doesn't merit saying, but the reason I say that is this is not lazy disparagement that is common in the discourse of a dead man here. This is, he formed the brand. More than Avalon Hill, more than his predecessors. When this became a hobby, it never needed to become what it is now. It never needed to be a brand. And I think it could have always been a folk thing. Maybe some would argue that the brand is what made it what it is. Some would say we need the brand. Well, I'm here to say I don't know about that. Like, you know, we could debate that, but in 2025, we don't. In 2025, everyone, every table can have the Dungeons and Dragons they need, can be the one they make. They are the experts in knowing what they need for their table. If that's Castles and Crusades, or Shadowdark, or Labyrinth Lord, or whatever flavor or version, Shadows of the Weird Wizard, or, you know, Worlds Without Number. These are just Dungeons and Dragons clones and paraclones. But I think the beauty is that people make games like Shadowdark, and Shadowdark is exactly the game for the people that need that game. And yet at the same time, they don't need it. And the truth is, they were already doing something similar to Shadowdark, or they already wanted something like Shadowdark. And someone made something, and they're like, wow, that's exactly what I need. That helps me out. And it's it's entirely voluntary. And it's owned by the participants now. Through crowdfunding, through indie projects, itch, DriveThruRPG, self-publishing. The brand hegemony, at least role-playing games, is coming to an end. And I only hope that continues and keeps going forward. I hope that this is how people see, for those that are really passionate about role-playing games, I hope that every table has the role-playing game the version that they want. I hope it's like the mid to early 70s, where you have the Arduin grimoire over on a completely different place, and they're taking things in a wacky and wild different direction. And people are taking the game and cracking it and moving it, and it belongs to the table and to the participants. And that's my hope. And this is sort of like an alternative idea of how to view this. And so when these things come up, I think it's a way to engage with the discourse in a healthy way, with the signal in a healthy way, with recruiting new players, with managing a clubhouse, and with attracting people to really cool games and ideas, and to be able to move the hobby forward and innovate and try new things, and also discover things we've lost too. And if this is interesting to you, let me know, and we can crack out more of these concepts. We can talk about more of them. But that's Folk Tabletop. Thanks for joining. Like, subscribe, and share. And every Tuesday, we're going to be releasing some of our Swords and Wizardry actual plays. We've got some more stuff coming up that I'm excited about. Our content is slowed down a little bit, but then we have some more things kind of further in the future that I really think are going to be cool, and I hope you'll join us for that. So thanks for joining us. God bless, and love you all. Mythic Mountains RPG is a private online play club that focuses on folk RPGs. Folk RPGs are the games that belong to all of us. They're what actually happens at a table between friends. It's their voice that has the authority on what is fun and what works for them. Weekly, we upload our games to allow others to sit in with us. The channel isn't monetized. We don't own the artwork, music, software, or games shown in these actual plays, and you can find links to their authors in the description. Like, subscribe, and share if you wish, or don't. Just like games in person, you're welcome to pull up a chair, sit in, and watch some of our games. No performances, no fancy equipment, just regular people playing folk pencil and paper role-playing games and having a good time. We hope these games will prove a source of enjoyment to anyone just wanting to listen in, anyone looking for examples of how actual groups run and play folk RPGs, and most importantly, if you haven't found your group yet, you're welcome here at ours.